Hello everyone, welcome you all to the webinar. Thank you for joining the session today. The topic of today's webinar is how to build your career in UX. It will be a 45-minute session where 30 minutes will be presentation and 15 minutes question and answers. So if you have any question, please send us using the chat option in the control panel. My name is Ninad. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce to our speaker today, John Isaac, who is also a mentor with TAD, the UX Academy, who is joining us from Australia. He specializes in user experience design, usability, and user research. He is into this field of user experience design for more than a decade now and has a passion to teach UX design. So without any delay, let's continue with our session. Over to you, John.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here as well, and welcome everyone to this introduction to UX. Let's just get started. Can you just confirm that you can see the screen here clearly?
Yes.
Perfect. As was mentioned, as I'm going through these slides, if you have any questions whatsoever, any thoughts, please use the chat feature, and I'll do my best to get back to you during the session here and straight after. So, introduction to user experience. If you think about your favorite app that you use on your phone, think about an app that you use every single day, whether it's a banking app, a chat app, let's say if it's Facebook or Messenger or anything of that sort. And then think about if you've ever wondered why some of these companies here on the screen are so Okay, I think we're back. Can you confirm that you can hear me again?
Yes. Yes, John, we can.
Great, thank you. So, perfect, thank you. So some of these companies here that we see on the screen, if you ever wonder why they are so successful or how they are so successful, these are companies that are very well known. They're constantly releasing new features. They are constantly, upgrading their services, for example, and gaining new followers. So if you've ever wondered why and how they do that, simply they use a human-centered design approach. It's basically a process, a industry-proven process they use to follow some of these steps here. So the top diagram there is our design thinking diagram, and those of you who have heard of design thinking, it's very well proven. It's a tried and tested process for building anything. It doesn't have to be a digital product. It could be a website, it could be an app, but it could also be anything else that you can imagine. It could be a physical product. For simplicity's sake, whenever I'm teaching user experience, we just use the bottom diagram there that you see: research, design, prototype, and test. That's much simpler to follow and understand. But basically, the process here includes a bit of research, so understanding what people need, and then defining the problems and the opportunities that people are looking for and that we can solve, and then coming up with some ideas and some solutions, some concepts that we can then prototype and test. So we build a version of that idea that we can then test with people, and then continuously improve that version. And there's no real one simple definition of UX. What I always told my students is that the definition of UX is personal to you. So as you're learning about user experience, you come up with your own definition. So it's not like you can't open up a dictionary and look up UX and find an official definition. It doesn't exist. But basically, this definition here for me is quite clear and meaningful, and it's by Don Norman, who is a very well-known designer and very well-respected in the field. And basically, he said that UX covers every interaction with a company, its services, and its products. So if you imagine when you're using a call center for support, or you're at the bank, or you're on a website buying some clothes, these are all part of the user experience. And obviously, as you can imagine, every part of that journey is very, very important. But if we look at further what is UX, on the right-hand side of this circle diagram, it shows that there's a happy user in the middle, and the user is us. It's a customer. It's a human being, and around that is everything that UX actually consists of. So it could be the visual, the way that a website or an app or a car or a spaceship or anything, the way it looks visually, the way it works, the way it functions. It could be anything to do with human psychology or behavior, the way we behave. And it could be anything about the usability of that product as well. So on the left-hand side, when we speak about user experience, most people tend to think that user experience is, the visual design. So when you on a website or you're using an app, people tend to judge the quality of the experience by how good something looks. But in reality, if you look at that left, is all of those points there and more. So it includes all of those and so much more. And mostly it's all of the work that happens behind the scenes to actually design and build the thing we can see. Obviously what we see is important, but a lot of the work is happening behind the scenes. And why is it important? Well, there's a reason why you and me and everyone we know continues to use apps. If you think about social media, we're using WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, all of these apps. There's a reason why we keep using them every day, and our friends use them. And again, Don Norman says that, it's great that we build products that are usable, but we also need to build products that bring, happiness and excitement and pleasure and fun. They add meaning and value and purpose to our lives, because now we live in an age where our life is, surrounded by technology and influenced by technology. So the user experience of anything that we use and interact with is extremely important. And the other reason is because, as with technology, we are still evolving. So if you think about, your recent experience with, let's say, online shopping or buying, let's say, a pair of shoes or anything online, this diagram represents the importance of every single touch point or interaction. So an example would be, I'm looking to buy a pair of shoes, but instead of jumping on a website and buying the pair of shoes, firstly, I will do some research online. I may look at social media. I may jump on Instagram or Pinterest. I may read reviews. I may do a Google search. I may go to the actual store to try on the shoes, first of all, but I know I can get them cheaper online. So I'm having an experience with every single part of this. So that's why it's very important that all of these touch points and interactions have a good experience of their own, so that in the end, I can purchase something and be satisfied. Now, if you're a business, then clearly you can see why it's so important to deliver such a great experience. And I think Amazon is a good example where, Amazon's website doesn't necessarily look the best. So, for example, it won't win any visual design awards, but the website is very, very usable. You can find what you're looking for, and the product then arrives at your home in a timely manner. So that experience that Amazon has created is partly the reason why they are such a large and successful company. And of course, if we don't follow that process of understanding what people need, or what they want, or what challenges they have, then oftentimes we will find our own way. And these two diagrams here, I think, are quite perfect in illustrating. Sometimes us as humans, we want to go from point A to B, but the design doesn't necessarily let us, or the design makes us take a different path. And oftentimes we will find a shortcut, we will find a faster way to do something. And so again, it's another reason why UX is extremely important, and it's powerful as well. Again, I would always tell my students to think outside of the digital world. So user experience, can be used to the process. It could be used to design, let's say, hospital equipment that keeps people alive. So think about how powerful that is, that you can work with medical software and medical equipment to keep someone alive or give them a better quality of life. I was recently part of a brand new school, so designing a school from the ground up. So again, using the design process to be able to design something that is usable and comfortable for young children and teachers as well. And again, as we see with electric cars, again, it's quite powerful because it can change our lives. So we're used to driving cars one way, but then with electric vehicles, our experience completely changes. But that last point is extremely important because UX is powerful enough to actually help us build better relationships with each other. So if 15 people in the local community get together and learn UX and how to solve problems, they can make a difference in their local communities. And that leads to stronger relationships as well. So again, from a human perspective, from a product perspective and digital perspective, UX is extremely, extremely powerful. There's a very well-known and famous video on YouTube. After this, I would suggest spending 8 minutes. It only goes for 8 minutes. If you, after this session, jump on YouTube and search for IDEO shopping cart, you will see exactly how fast, how creative this process can be, and how it helps you connect with other human beings and colleagues as well. But this video is a great example of how simple it can be for us to actually make a difference in someone else's life. So people often ask, okay, what type of roles would a UX designer play? What would I be doing? Who would I be working with? What type of organization can I be working for? What type of organization should I be working for? And typically, yes, UX is, as we said, a human-centered process, which means you'll be working with so many other people, which could include visual designers, programmers or developers, anyone who is responsible for owning a product or managing a product, project managers and business analysts, and basically anybody. You'll find within the research component of UX where you will go out and research and speak to subject matter experts. You may be solving a problem for, a hospital, for example, and you need to go and speak to doctors and psychologists and nurses and patients. So again, you'll be equipped with that toolkit, that design toolkit and the skills and this process to allow you to do that. But basically, you will be working with so many different people, and it will vary and depend on the organization that you'll be working for. And the question here is, well, can I work on my own? And the answer is absolutely. I've been in many situations where I've been the only UX designer, and I've probably worked with one person and sometimes just on my own because that was the nature of the project. The responsibilities, well, yes, UX designers have great responsibility on their shoulders. Sorry. First and foremost, you are the voice of the customer. So you go out and you speak to people, users and customers, and then represent the user or the customer back to your business and speak on their behalf. So you will present to them the challenges and the problems that your audience and the users had. So you need to be a good storyteller to be able to articulate and communicate the problems and the opportunities and the direction of where the project is heading. Because remember, the user isn't there in your organization. It will be you and your team. So documenting all of that. And also, and this is quite challenging, is that you will need to communicate the value and the return on investment of UX. So any organizations looking to increase sales or have more sign-ups or whatever their goal is, helping them understand the value and the importance that user experience can make, the difference it can make to their business if they invest in it. But the biggest thing ultimately is that you're a problem solver. You'll be asked to solve a problem. Now that problem could be small, could be big, but once you take on that user experience journey, that process that we looked at, you may uncover other problems. You may uncover different opportunities. But at the end of the day, you are a problem solver using this creative design process that can potentially untangle any problem. So how do you do it? Well, again, it depends on where you're working and what sort of processes they use. But typically, as a UX designer, your deliverables or the things you will produce could be any of these. Could be a research report, could be an affinity diagram to communicate your research, wireframes and prototypes, which I'm sure most of you have seen already. If you just do a quick search, you'll see so many wireframes, and you'll realize that they are quite common. And usability test reports, these are generally the types of artifacts and documentation that you will produce. But they will vary, like I said, and the whole purpose of these is to communicate something. So a research report will communicate your research findings. It will communicate the problems that people were experiencing. You may even produce, and it's not on this list, but you may produce a persona, and the persona is a representation of your users. And again, your wireframes and prototypes you use to test, you may document that in a video, for example. So the point is that all of these will communicate back to the business with the whole idea and intent of solving the particular problem that you've been asked to tackle. So the tools will also vary. This is a question of, and we'll get to it in point 2 with prototyping, but the tools are always changing and evolving. So the tools that we used to use 5 years ago or 10 years ago, some of them don't exist, and the tools we use today won't be around in 5 or 10 years time. If you think about if you've heard of Photoshop, for example, or Acrobat, or all of these types of software, they're always being updated, they're always being improved, and there's always a company out there that's producing new software. So for research, you may use surveys, and for surveys, again, there are email surveys, there are online surveys that you can produce. You can use Google Forms, social media, conducting research face-to-face interviews or focus groups. There are a number of ways to conduct research. And again, it depends on the type of project you're working on and how you can access users, where they are. If you can't do something face-to-face, then you do something remote. So your users may be overseas, then you will need to get a little creative and conduct research using another method. And prototyping, some of the most common tools these days are InVision, Sketch, Axure, and paper. Obviously paper and pen or Sharpies. So again, it depends on you and your team, depends on the organization, depends on the project, depends on your time. But the point is that there is no right or wrong. The whole point is that you are trying to communicate something to the business. There's no right or wrong in terms of which tool you use. Likewise with testing, if you're testing a website or you're testing an app or a prototype, then again, you could choose to do this face-to-face if you have access to users, or you could do it remotely. You could post something up on InVision, for example, and send the link to 100 users and then have them test that product for you. And for documentation, again, there is no right or wrong. Google Docs seems to be, it's free, it's fast, it's accessible anywhere. But again, depending on your project and your team, you may choose to use a completely different tool for documentation. And there are so many other tools. Post-it notes are a UX designer's best friend. We're constantly going through post-it notes and paper, large sheets of paper to, stick our research findings and our prototypes and mood boards and anything we have, because we want our work to be exposed. We don't want to hide our work on a file or a server somewhere. So again, the tools will vary. There's no right or wrong. That's the most important thing to understand. And when I was teaching UX recently, we would always encourage students to find tools they are comfortable with and try things out, try different tools and learn something new and learn from each other as well. That's very, very important. UX opportunities at the moment are quite strong, quite good. I would say the past 18 months, especially here in Australia and in Asia, more so, we've seen a growth in UX roles, mainly because more and more companies are realizing the power and the value and the return on investment as well. So it's very good for us, which means there's a demand for UX designers, and anybody getting into the field in the next, I'd say 12 months to 18 months is in a great position. It's still a very new industry in Australia and Asia compared to let's say the US, for example. So there are many career opportunities. Now, you can be called just a UX designer and work on research and testing and strategy and everything, but there are also some other roles that we see called UX researcher, which focuses purely on research and testing. There are new roles called UX writer, which focuses mainly on the copy, like the text and the words and the language that is being used on an app or a website, for example. And there are, of course, various UX management positions these days now, UX manager and associate directors and head of UX. So depending on the career path you choose to take, you could end up obviously as a junior, as a mid, as a senior, as a lead, as a consultant. But again, it is your own personal journey. You will find your own career path. Some people lean more towards research, some lean more towards design. But again, the most important thing to understand here is that UX is a very unique industry and discipline where we are not bound by time. So what that means is you don't need to work, for example, as 5 years as a UX designer to become a manager or become a senior. And that's a very important distinction to make because, as I said, it's a very unique point about UX where you're judged on the type of work that you're doing and the type of case studies you can showcase. And many of my students were in UX for, I'd say, a year, maybe just over 1 year, and they're moving on to mid and senior levels because within that year, they did some amazing work. They did some very strong work. So that's a very unique point of UX which you should keep in mind. And UX designers are obviously, like I said, judged by case studies. So you have a portfolio and you can show people, potential employers, you will show them different projects you've worked on. So, here's one project you've worked on. Let's say it was in banking. Here are the problems that you solved. Here's how you did it. Here's the process. Then you'll show another case study. It's another project you worked on, which was in another field, another industry. And then you start to develop your own portfolio. Very similar to how visual designers will showcase their own portfolio of logos and websites and any branding they've worked on. So UX designers, our portfolios are, again, quite unique. But there are plenty of examples of case studies out there. And of course, joining local networks and communities and learning from each other. LinkedIn is a great place to connect with other UX designers. And in Australia and in the US, we have a very strong community called meetups, where they're just small events where we go and network with people and speak to people. And they have, presentations as well. So again, the portfolio is very, very important. But like I said, many examples online. And of course, like I said, your career path, you'll start somewhere and then you'll keep growing. And the way to do that is to understand that, technology is always changing, which means there will always be problems, which means we as designers need to always be on our feet and stay relevant. And staying relevant means, doing some reading, jump on reputable blogs, join your local networks, as we said. Find some mentors, find some people who've been in the industry for a while, who can point you in the right direction, and find your own path. So, there's plenty of resources out there. Jump on Google, jump on LinkedIn, and find where everyone else is getting their education from in an online world. And you'll find that you'll start to bookmark, as I have, your favorite type of resources. And where I would suggest you start is obviously, if you're looking to get into UX, find a reputable online education source. And obviously, even once you become a designer, the online education doesn't end. So that, like I said in the previous slide, education as for a designer doesn't end. And I would encourage you to subscribe to some well-known design blogs. My two favorites would be Envision and IDEO. If you Google Envision blog, they have a fantastic blog resource there where they have many interviews and case studies there from other design teams around the world. And IDEO, of course, is part of that video that I mentioned earlier. As I said, again, LinkedIn is a very, very valuable resource. And there's the Google Design Sprint book. If you just jump on the website, you'll see it's probably easier than getting your hands on the book. It's much faster anyway. It's a 5-day design sprint. Basically, Google came up with a 5-day process to solve problems, and it's another fantastic resource that you can use. And that is the end of the slides. But I would again just encourage you to keep being curious and keep learning, and it would. And again, any questions? There's the chat feature, and I'll send it back to you all here.
Thank you for the session, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have Neha Modgil with us, who is the founder of TAD the UX Academy. Meanwhile, you can type your questions and send across with the chat feature. Over to you, Neha.
Thanks, John. That was really nice. And I'm sure the audience here got a peek into why UX, what lies ahead in the field of UX, and how do they get started. I want to also talk a bit about TAD the UX Academy. TAD is a powerhouse of Tech with Consulting. Tech with Consulting is a UX consulting firm based out of India and having offices in all across Asia. And we've launched TAD, which is a UX Executive Certification Program. It's a 3-month program which will help people in understanding various aspects of user experience, aspects that John has already covered, which is research and design and understanding the user-centered design methodology and putting it into practice. This is mainly for working professionals, and hence it's a weekend program. It's a live streamed online program where mentors, international and Indian, would talk about their fields of expertise. So somebody who has extensive experience in psychology of design would talk about psychology, and somebody would talk about conducting research, how to do analysis, affinity diagrams, etc. This program is going to run on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. In case you miss any session, there would be recorded sessions available for you to view later. And if you've got any questions, you can post them and the mentors would answer those questions. After a 3-month duration, if you still have questions, there is a 1-month support program where you can post questions and get answers. And during this 3-month workshop, we believe that we also need to meet to be able to ideate and design, and hence there is a 2-day intensive in-person workshop which would be organized where everybody could come together and brainstorm, ideate, really deep dive into design thinking. So that's about the program. There is, to be able to enroll for the program, there is an UX aptitude test that you need to take. The UX aptitude test window is currently open. So in case you're interested, you could register on the website and take the test. The last date for taking the test is Sunday. This Sunday is when we are closing the test. However, we are closing registrations for the test today. And the results would be published next week. So that's about TAD. I'd leave it now for all of you to ask questions to John about the lovely presentation that he's given, or if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to address.
Hello, John.
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, John, can you see the questions in the chat section?
Yes, I'm actually just replying to one at the moment about the Amazon example. Yep.
Can you just speak out those questions and answer them for the audience?
Sure. I'd be happy to. Basically, the first question was, the difference between UX and UI. Taking the example of Amazon, if the visual is not too great, does it not lead to dissonance? And the reply I was replying with was, basically, the Amazon example shows that yes, the visual design, the UI or the visual design is still relatively important. However, Amazon focus shows that they place more focus on the experience. That's what they're known for. They keep the visuals very simple. And if you've been on the Amazon homepage recently, you'll see that there is so much information. Even when you're on a product page, there is just so much content, so much information. So they need to be very, very careful with the effort and the styling that goes into the visuals, because the goal for them is to allow us to buy a product, obviously, and that's what they need. And I think they've found the right balance between the experience and the visual. That's why it's so successful. But the point that we should make, since we're talking about UX, is they are constantly testing and refining their site and their app, because again, the more they learn about their users, the better experience or the more personal experience they can deliver. So I think it's a very good question that says, well, if the visual doesn't look very good, but we need to look at it in context, and we need to look at it case by case. You know, there are many, I would say, and again, looking at the mobile app for Amazon, it looks very good, and it works quite well. But the desktop website, it's a bit of a different story because they are displaying more content. So the content, the hierarchy, and the information architecture plays a role as well. Someone just asked, so what is information architecture? That's a good question. It's very timely. Information architecture is, it's a number of things, but if you think about, let's use Amazon again, Amazon's menu structure or how you find a product. So information architecture is about the way that content is actually structured and published on a website or an app. Menus are a good example. So how do we find a pair of red shoes on Amazon? They have a search feature, then they have breadcrumbs, then they have a menu. So information architecture, is also designed and tested using a few UX methods. And it's a way of grouping certain items together, looking for themes. So it's a very, very technical and important component of UX as well. Let's look for one more question.
Also, I would want to add that if you want to know things like what is information architecture, or you know, what is navigation flow, what are personas, you could actually enroll for the TAD Academy and get these answers. And John, in fact, is one of the mentors with us who would be taking some of these subjects and some of these courses with us.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Actually, yes, these are. I mean, some of these questions, you know, are great, but they're in the course itself. It dives a lot deeper. So, in terms of, let's say, information architecture, well, okay, great. What is it? How do we do it? What are some examples? And again, as I said before, there's no real right or wrong way of doing it, especially with user flows. User flows are very important, but there's no right or wrong. But the course will show you, you know, the sort of the detail of what that actually is, and then through project work, you'll be able to apply and implement these learnings. But again, no right or wrong for user flow as well. You could do that on paper. You could do that using software. It all comes down to the project and the problem that you're actually solving. Just one more question here that says, any examples of products that have used design thinking and are really famous? Absolutely. Someone's answered Apple iPhone. That's a perfect example. But many examples. But I think that video that I encouraged you to watch earlier will give you some more examples as well.
There's one more question that I'd like to take up. Karthik has asked if the test can be taken online for TAD. Karthik, you could register for the test online. You'd be sent a link. You could click on the link and take the test online anytime. It's open 24/7. For registration, you need to go on the website. For taking the test, you'd be sent a separate link. John, are you taking more questions?
These are the only questions that were in there, but if anyone else has any other questions now, please type them up and I'll be happy to answer them.
Sure. What we'd also do, if we do get questions, we'll email them to you, whatever we need to answer from you. Thanks for the session. And this video would be up for viewing on YouTube. We'd send the link to everybody. And thanks again, John. This was really nice.
Thank you, John.
Not a problem. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you all for attending this session. We'll conclude this session. Look forward for TAD social media pages for upcoming webinars. Thank you.
Thank you.